Teslacam, I hope you're satisfied.
Pay close attention to the white car to the right of this truck, which the truck driver apparently didn't see. While Julio was passing the semi-truck on its left, the trucker began merging to the right. He didn't see the white car in his blind spot, clipping the back end. When he realized what was happening, the trucker tried swerving away from the car, but he overcorrected and lost control. Right then, Julio's Tesla began sounding the alarm while FSD did its best to avoid the out-of-control semi, which was now veering into Julio's lane. FSD steered as far to the left as possible, barely missing the median barrier. Julio hit the juice pedal and used his dual motors to accelerate away from the semi, which had managed to drag the white car across the highway and into the barrier. Julio and his passengers were fine, and his Tesla was completely untouched. Sadly, the same can't be said for the vehicles behind him. Jerry was driving down Highway 400 in Canada when traffic ahead of him slowed down, but the drivers behind him weren't paying attention. The drivers of an Acura and a Mitsubishi both managed to swerve in time, only to reveal a Volkswagen Jetta before it smashed into the back of Jerry's Model Y. Jerry stopped and made sure everyone was okay, and the young driver of the Jetta was actually afraid of him as he approached. Jerry calmed him down and told him he wasn't angry, just disappointed. Okay, he didn't actually say that. What Jerry didn't realize was that his Tesla had automatically called 911 and sent a notification to his wife's phone. Firefighters and paramedics responded, but both Jerry and the Jetta driver declined care. Both of them filed reports at the collision center, which is when Jerry found out the Jetta driver didn't have comprehensive insurance, which would have paid for the repairs to his own car even though the collision was his fault. His insurance did cover the cost of fixing Jerry's Tesla though, $35,000 US. Completing the repairs took 2.5 months. Lynx was entering an on-ramp where 2 lanes merge into one. Most drivers use the zipper merge method, but the driver of this modified Honda Civic was too special for that. Instead of letting Lynx merge into the lane, the Honda driver hugged the bumper of the Lexus ahead of him, blocking Lynx from merging. Lynx went ahead and merged behind him instead, but his reckless driving caught up to him moments later. When the Honda driver crossed a solid line to enter the highway, he collided with a Toyota Highlander. Lynx went ahead and sent this footage to the police in case they want to find the Honda driver. Lynx thinks he'll be found responsible since he crossed a solid line before the collision. Zach was headed back from a skiing trip when he entered a bad snowstorm. When his traffic light turned green, he spotted the driver of a black SUV running the red light. While he was watching the black SUV, he failed to notice a Toyota Tacoma that followed it right through the intersection. Zach's Tesla was immobilized by the impact. Police, paramedics, and firefighters responded to the scene. Zach is surprised that even though his airbags didn't deploy, he walked away without a scratch. Zach told us something in his car had begun smoking, so the firefighters cut through every wire they could find in an attempt to prevent a battery fire. When his repair bill exceeded $67,000 US, Zach's Tesla was deemed a total loss. He used his insurance settlement to replace it with an Audi Q8 e-tron. His Audi doesn't have a Teslacam, of course, but Zach sent us this footage from when the 91-year-old driver of another Audi crashed into his in a parking lot only 2 months after he'd taken delivery. Yikes! Cam was driving behind a red Hyundai when a trucker in front of him made a dangerous lane change. The Hyundai driver did not want to let the trucker pass and stayed in the truck's blind spot, resulting in a collision that damaged the Hyundai's side view mirror. The driver of the Hyundai then tailgated the truck aggressively while laying on the horn. The trucker eventually merged back over after overtaking traffic. The Hyundai driver then sped up, but it looks like the trucker followed suit. The Hyundai driver cut the truck off and forced him to stop in the right lane. Thankfully, this reckless maneuver didn't cause any other vehicles to collide with the truck. Cam told us the Hyundai driver looked very aggressive and the damage was minor, so he chose not to stop. While Gabriel was on his way to work and merging to reach an upcoming exit, he found out the hard way that the truck ahead of him had a layer of ice coating its roof. Gabriel had been keeping his eyes on his blind spot while making 2 consecutive lane changes, and he failed to notice the ice as it hurtled through the air toward his Tesla. A huge chunk of ice smashed into his windshield, shattering it. The impact left Gabriel momentarily shocked, but once he'd realized what had happened, he sped up to flag down the truck driver. The driver of the box truck denied responsibility until Gabriel showed him the video proof from his Model 3's Teslacam. He then told Gabriel he didn't have any insurance documentation with him, instead providing contact info for his boss. Gabriel immediately called the number, but the driver's boss refused to provide his insurance details, claiming he wasn't liable for any ice on his truck's roof. Gabriel eventually gave up, providing all the information he had to his own insurance provider, along with his Teslacam footage. The other driver's insurance provider eventually accepted liability for the iceberg impact before paying $1,800 to repair Gabriel's Model 3. Cindy was driving her Model 3 in Calgary, Alberta. As she came to an intersection, she proceeded straight. An oncoming Honda driver was waiting to turn left, but he turned in front of Cindy rather than yielding to her as he should have. Cindy T-boned the passenger side of the Honda. Thankfully, the occupants of both vehicles were unhurt. Cindy's insurance provider decided to write off her Tesla after the repairs exceeded $46,000. She ordered a new Tesla Model 3 to replace it, and she told us she feels safe driving a Tesla after experiencing this collision. Cindy also sent a message to the city of Alberta asking why there wasn't a traffic light at this intersection, and less than 30 days later, the city installed one. Needless to say, Cindy was impressed by their fast response. Hopefully the new traffic signal will prevent others from being involved in collisions here. Trigger was driving his Model 3 in Ottawa when he spotted a guy at a bus stop who was blocking traffic and taunting drivers. It looks like a girl was trying to stop him, or at least get him out of the road, but she wasn't having much success. The guy did his best to block an SUV, but the driver finally managed to drive around him. That seemed to be the end of the story, or was it? Moments later, a box truck entered the intersection, also known as the danger zone. The same guy rushed out of the bus stop and started taunting the truck driver, waving his hands as if to say, "Come at me." We aren't really sure what's going on here. Could this be some attempt at an insurance scam? When Trigger finally got a green light, he hightailed it out of there. Alex was driving in Vancouver, Canada, when he found himself behind a genius driver who was hauling drywall on top of their hatchback. The load was obviously not secured well enough, and the drywall had started to angle up after catching air underneath it. Alex realized that the load was going to go flying sooner or later, but they were on a single-lane highway with a no-passing zone for the next 12 miles. Meanwhile, traffic behind Alex was tailgating him, evidently unhappy with his speed, and Alex didn't feel like it was safe to try to pull over. Unsurprisingly, the drywall started flying in every direction. Alex never felt an impact, so he slowed down and yelled at the hatchback driver before continuing on. Yudcat was headed home from the airport with his wife and 2-year-old. This was the day after fresh snowfall and the roads were dangerously slippery. He'd stopped for a red light when he noticed a Mitsubishi approaching a bit too fast from behind. The Mitsubishi driver tried to avoid his stopped Tesla by swerving to the left, but they still ended up scraping the back of it. They pulled over safely to exchange information, but the driver's husband wanted to settle the matter privately and initially refused to give Yudcat any insurance information. Yudcat had a bad feeling about that and only agreed to get a repair quote after insisting on taking a photo of the other driver's insurance information just in case. That proved to be a good decision. When he contacted the other driver with a repair quote from a Tesla-authorized body shop, they immediately began questioning him about the source of the estimate. Rather than argue with them, Yudcat contacted the other driver's insurance provider and let them take care of the repairs. Fixing his Tesla cost over $10,000 and took 20 days. Gary was heading home from work when the driver of a white car started crossing the road in front of him. The other driver stopped partway across the road, forcing the driver of a Mini Cooper to swerve into the oncoming lane, where it was clipped by a Ford Escape before spinning out. The driver of the white car then took off like nothing had happened. Gary chased after her to get her license plate number, and she then pulled over a few blocks away. Gary told her she needed to go back to the scene of the collision she'd caused. She was shaken up, but told him she'd return. Gary then headed back to the collision to check on the victims. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. He waited for the police with them, but after a long wait, he gave his contact info to the victims and left. The daughter of the Ford driver texted Gary later to tell him that neither the police nor the other driver ever came to the scene. He sent them his Teslacam footage, so thankfully they have crucial video evidence of what happened. Well done, Gary. Jason was about to leave a Supercharger when someone backed into one of the stalls. Jason got out and asked if he could help in any way, but that's when the guy started complaining about how bad Teslas are, which struck Jason as a little strange. Perhaps he'd rented it? Jason pointed out that the charging port was on the other side of the Model 3 before going back to his own car. As he pulled away, he did notice that the other driver had finally managed to get plugged in. Kevin was driving down Highway 2 in Ontario when he noticed traffic slowing down and flashing blue lights up ahead. Suddenly, he realized there was a police pursuit in progress. Wow, it seems like Kevin found himself in the middle of an action movie. As he got closer, he realized it was actually more like a cowboy movie. A horse was on the loose, and guys in pickup trucks were trying to lasso it. Kevin pulled over to stay out of the way, and thankfully, the Cowboys eventually cornered and caught the horse. Jeff was on his way home with his son Jacob when he decided to be polite and let a truck merge into traffic. What a gentleman. Obviously, we can expect Jeff to be treated with the same level of respect, right? Nope. Shortly after Jeff let him into traffic, the other driver rolled coal. Jeff told us he's been driving a Tesla since 2019, but this was the first time he's been hit with the dreaded carbon cloud. 5 years is pretty good. His son Jake immediately said, "This has to go to Wham Baam Teslacam." Winnett, his wife, and his 2-day-old baby were headed home after a medical appointment. They were at a traffic light when a Lexus rear-ended a Ford behind them, and the Ford was pushed forward into their Tesla. Full self-driving 1236 was active, and FSD was able to avoid rear-ending the vehicle ahead of them by locking the brakes after impact. Another example of how driver assistance systems can prevent collisions. Winnett's wife was in shock after the loud collision, but their baby slept right through the whole thing. The elderly driver and passenger of the Lexus were in shock, so Winnett called 911 right away. The driver of a passing Alberta Health Services vehicle asked if Winnett needed help, and he asked them to check on his baby while he waited for police and paramedics to arrive. Thankfully, his baby was fine. The estimated cost of repairing their Model Y is $8,000 US. David pulled up behind a police car stopped at a red light in Montreal, Quebec, when the driver behind him did something very risky. They drove over the median to reach a turn lane. David was certain the cop would pull the other driver over, but he didn't. How very Canadian, eh? When the light turned green, a BMW driver signaled to turn left, even though signs clearly indicated that left turns aren't allowed here. The officer gestured to inform the driver that they needed to go straight instead. The driver seemed to understand, but then they turned left anyway once the police had driven past them. I guess that used up what was left of the officer's Canadian friendliness because he turned on his party lights and chased down the BMW to deliver some instant justice. Ashpinder jumped into his Model 3 to head home after meeting a friend. He was traveling northbound on Burrard Street in downtown Vancouver. While he was driving at about 20 miles per hour, he entered an intersection on a green light before feeling a heavy impact from the left. The driver of a Honda Civic ran his red light before slamming into Ashpinder's Tesla at full speed. After the collision, Ashpinder immediately ran to the other driver in anger to ask if he was under the influence. The Honda driver denied being under the influence and claimed he'd fallen asleep after driving for 5 or 6 hours. Ashpinder called the police right after the collision, but their response time was disappointing. He waited for them at the scene for at least 2 hours before giving up and heading home. Almost 3.5 hours after the incident, Ashpinder received a call from a police officer asking where he was and why he wasn't at the scene. When Ashpinder told him he'd gone home, the officer told him there was nothing he could do. Ashpinder made an insurance claim, without a police report of course, and his insurance provider decided to total the car and write Ashpinder a check for the remaining value of his 2022 Tesla Model 3. Jason was driving his Model X when he witnessed a Toronto police officer rear-end a Lexus SUV. The Lexus driver was very thankful that Jason stopped, as he was already on the phone with the 911 operator asking for a supervisor to be dispatched to the scene. He told Jason that the officer had been following and harassing him before this happened, even stopping traffic both ways to threaten him with a ticket. Needless to say, he was very happy when Jason gave him a copy of his Teslacam footage. Jeff had parked his Model Y on the streets of Montreal when another driver parked in front of it. A group of people left the vehicle, activating Sentry mode, and Jeff told us he couldn't believe his eyes when he reviewed the footage. The group of people clearly showed interest in his car, even pointing and laughing at it before one of the girls appeared to kick it. He told us he found a clear footprint right on the bumper cover. Thankfully, he was able to wipe it off and there was no permanent damage. Even so, he asked, "What gives? Leave other people's stuff alone."
Wham! Bam, we got a Patreon, man. Please support the show.